And start the clock. How are you going to develop this? Now, you might want to give yourself bigger area for where you have lots of tiny little curves and lines. For example, I don't want to use the word, but in this area here, in the top front. So I'm going to use the same strategy that I used before, and I'm going to try to do a quick read. Much better. I know I have more time. So I'm actually closing one eye and doing a very simplified geometric read of the angles. And it's not precise at all. So a lot of these relationships, notice that once I have this shape that goes here, I want to see how it relates to this angle here, because I could see and I could connect with this point in order to get the volume, the thickness of it. So once I have this point and I know it connects with this one, now I have this one, I see how it connects down with this one. So putting all these pieces together, once you have one, it shows you the other. Once you have two, it makes it even easier to find the third. That's called triangulation. And it works very well with any type of angle reading. So if you begin to recognize those angles and you see triangles, you should use that technique. So notice I'm still very, very simplified. I'm closing my eye, seeing how it relates, how much further out. So I could reassess, revisit that line, and very slowly there. So, interesting. It looks a little thinner here, so I might widen this, make this a little more angled. And now I really focus on that negative space shape. So I could see it. Obviously, I'm looking at this white, sharp little angle, almost like a little tooth here into the other corner. And again, whatever comes to mind, just like when we see clouds and we see shapes in the clouds, that is what you're looking for, to identify simplicity of shapes. Very careful in this area once you get to this area here where I am, because you're going to tend to skip through the actual information that is there and make up your own. And that is our left brain taking over. Closing one eye and forgetting about what you are supposed to be drawing, meaning you don't identify the thing, only the shape and the angle of it. Otherwise, it will happen. We make up information. Notice when you kind of speed up or hasten your pace, it means you might be kind of skipping through something where you could maybe pay a little closer look. And it's because you think you know the information already. Oh, wow, it did take us the whole full 5 minutes. So, yeah, that's why we're going to maybe switch up a couple of the later ones. Because it can take you. Once we get into this detail here, that's where you need to be really, really careful. We tend to get slow and tight, and we lose track of what we've been working ourselves all the way up to here. We tend to really begin to make up information. And there we have it. So then I can make my judgments on, okay, I could see different angles. And again, what you're looking for is that face vase. So all of these shapes, we're not looking at the, the vase, we would be looking at the face. And then analyze it. See how you did when you look at the actual negative space in the shape of it. Perfect. Okay, let's move to number 2. Reset the clock. And start it. All right, so I give you that warning always to pace yourself. One thing to look for is, how do we start? Where did I start? How did I make that decision? So I'm again looking at, just for proportion purposes, get a sense of this negative shape, negative space. With very simplified lines. It should feel a little familiar from our earlier version, but this time we can take a closer look. Some of the smaller, and most importantly, the angles, the relationships. Is this line lower or higher? Closing one eye, not forgetting to flatten the image. And really, really simplify the form. So I think I'm in good shape. That took 1.5 minutes. And now I'll re-walk my lines, making sure I pay closer attention to fully to the negative space. I'm going to skip through this area, just go down this way instead. Some of the subtle curves. Notice how long, what is the difference between the time you spend looking at the reference and the time you spend looking at your paper. That is crucial. I'm going to tell you 95 to 98% of the time, my eyes are on my reference. Tiny glimpses. Once I place my charcoal, having a sense of that blind contour drawing technique. So you can easily see the shape and trust what you see. As we begin to add more and more detail, we begin to see how certain parts of it kind of tend to get a little more, I use the word tight, because it is in a way kind of, it does get slower, harder, tighter. And what I mean is our lines. And you want to stay loose, kind of in a creative mode, sketch mode, where you don't feel like it's final, where you still can come over as you reassess. Take a second look. Here I'm going to take a quick second stage of smaller angles to get that proportion. There we go. So no details here at all. Not yet. And here's where we would get, again, that word tight and slow. And we lose track, really, of what it is we're focusing on. And I could begin to make sense of what it is, what's happening here, by adding just a little bit of maybe shadow. And maybe that way I could refine some of these shapes. But overall, we're just looking more for a line quality today. That's because I had a little extra time. And the absolute key thing to look for is mostly this, and a comparison of those small areas where you can actually identify the directions and the actual shapes of them and be pretty confident that, yep, got it. Or maybe it'll give you a clue to what is for the next one, where we need to focus a little more. Okay. Let's see, 48, 50. Okay, perfect. We're going to do this one, 5 minutes, and then we're going to move to two 20-minute ones. I'm sorry, two 10-minute ones. So this one, you notice it does have, oh, let me start the clock. There we go. It has a lot more sharper edges and curves and ins and outs. You still want to find a solution, always an easier solution, without getting too caught up from the beginning. Still getting a little more sense of the whole, the general, the big to the small, the simple to the more complex. So some of these lines I'm really just blind contour drawing 98, 95% of the time, eyes on my reference, and I'm trying to identify the simplest, biggest angles and lines in order for me to just get a general proportion. And that looks fine. Maybe a little thicker, maybe a little more separate here. That has to do with the size of the head and maybe this shape here. And now I get into my negative space reading. So where I select to start is always about how you see it, how you see this easy. I'm going to avoid this area here. I'm going to save that if I have plenty of time. I'll get into it. Here's, for me, a little bit of an easier read. And I look at this because it will kind of set the pose. So I see a little bit of the weight of the torso and how it relates to the pose of the head. Closing one eye, I actually see the sharp line angles and curves. And like I said, I'm going to avoid this for now as I run into, once again, more simplified shapes. Pay attention to how much detail you're trying to put in your first pass. If you're doing the final detail on your first line, you might not have time to go to look at the entire figure. Not in 5 minutes. And it's not a good way, honestly, to check yourself as you work yourself through the entire figure. If you have something that needs to be revisited, rearranged, you've spent way too much time on one area, you're going to have to redo all that work. And that's mainly why you would want to. Again, I'm doing sort of think of it as stage 1, stage 2 kind of line. This would be stage 2, where again, I'm not let's say percentage-wise, I may be doing like 20, 30% of the detail. I'm still skipping through most of all the small, tiny little folds, and still getting a good general sense, the overall sense of, not forgetting, looking at negative space. And we have a very interesting shape here, negative space shape. So I'm going to try to get, looking at two things. I'm looking at the positive space, meaning the silhouette, the thickness of it, in order to get a sense of the proportion, and now the shape of the negative space between them. And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. But the more you can simplify it, the better you're going to do. Now I'm going to get to this final one here, where you see sharp angles, and it's all about the direction of the line as well. And that'll do it. Once I add other details or features or color, shadow to it, it becomes much richer. There we go. And notice you can get away with a very rich, strong drawing without having to go. It's a good question to ask yourselves. How much detail do I need to put in? How much is enough detail? And I would urge you to kind of push towards the other way. Less is more. Less is more. And you can absolutely say so much more with fewer lines, if those lines are quality lines.